What are what's some of the helpful language? You alluded to a bit of that when you talk about conflict that you have with Ashley sometimes. Like what's helpful language for a founder to say? Is it forgiveness, Lyle? Like I'm thinking forgiveness has to play a role here too in terms of fathers who are highly critical, or it's always got to be their way or the highway. How does the next gen stand against that or say, hey, I have a different way of looking at this?
Yeah. Yeah, I think forgiveness is a big part of it. And that's not a snap moment, right? That takes years of working through, right? And kind of wrestling with, I want to forgive, but you just said something really dumb that really ticks me off, and now I'm back to not forgiving, right? And you kind of wrestle with that and you go back and forth.
I had to apologize as a speaker on many occasions, especially to the men founders, because women are also founders of farms. And they say, Elaine, I feel like getting a little beat up here.
Mm-hmm.
And I say, well, Charlie, that's because you hold all the power.
Mm-hmm.
That's because you're 72 years old and you don't have a plan in place. And the canoe is kind of spinning in this little eddy of turmoil here because nobody knows what direction the canoe is supposed to be going, or the farm. And you're having a hard time letting go and stepping back without stepping away. And you're also highly avoidant to conflict. You're not willing to sit
Mm-hmm.
tough conversations. Welcome to the Farm Family Harmony podcast. I'm Elaine Froese, Farm Family Coach, here with another episode full of transition tips, tactics, and sometimes hard truths to get harmony on your farm. Welcome, folks, to episode 47 of the Farm Family Harmony podcast. I'm your host. I'm Farm Family Coach Elaine Froese, coming to you from my certified seed farm in southwestern Manitoba. And as we're recording this today, I have the meal buckets out on my counter for 6 men who are working really hard to load trucks and plant grain in the fields. And I've also got one of my coaching team with me today, Lyle Wiens, who hails from Altona, Manitoba, which is where my husband drives his semi sometimes to go and deliver canola to Bungie. So Lyle, tell us about your morning career and what you like to do in the afternoons when you're working with farm families.
Oh man. Well, right now, thanks for having me back on. It's my second time. I'm a repeat visitor. That's exciting. Right now I'm very preoccupied, and I've actually got like commodity futures on the second screen here. I should probably minimize that while we talk, but I'm kind of glued to watching canola futures right now.
Okay.
Their targets at Bungie are so close to hitting.
Oh, we're going to have to stop recording and come back to another time, or how's this going to work?
No, it'll be fine. But that's how I fill my mornings. Lots of analyzing and paying attention to markets. And in afternoons, I'm working with farm families, and I'm trying to learn often, and just learning and reading and catching up as much on farm family transition and succession information as much as I can.
And where does the passion in your belly come from that? Wow, because I think for those of us who are watching this on YouTube, you have this beautiful painting in your office behind you that I think your grandfather did. So tell us about your story.
This is actually a painting that my wife's grandfather did.
There you go.
And it's of his family cross country skiing. He's from Nipawa, was a teacher there. And and cross country skiing has been something that Ashley and I have enjoyed. Um, as a and it's really evolved into a peaceful activity, right? In the winters here, it's blisteringly cold, often, and to be outside and to breathe fresh air in and be in nature, and in that peace and quiet, and reflecting on things and quieting yourself has been really important for my journey.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I think that's probably some of the meaning for that. Uh, my, what I want to talk about today is something that I spend a lot of time thinking about. You know, one of your big sayings is we can't what is it? We can't do the push-ups for you.
Right.
And I actually don't like that saying because I can't relate to it because I don't do push-ups. And
Not
so I don't.
which is like you're over 6'5" or something. You're so big.
Yeah, they're
The
too
weight
hard.
the weight, that would be just really hard work for you.
So if I don't like push-ups, I can't expect anyone else to do them.
Okay.
Uh, but
Fair enough.
the saying that I like instead is oh, now it's escaping me, but basically as farm coaches we will jump in the canoe with you as you're going downstream, and we'll paddle alongside you and help you navigate, but eventually we're going to jump out, and your canoe will keep on going down that river whether you like it or not, and but you need to guide it yourself at some point.
Well, and that's an interesting word picture because as soon as you said jump in the canoe, I had this picture of me in high school with Craig Christopherson and in the White Shell because I grew up around Springfield area, and I always wanted to know how close we were getting to the rapids because then things are going to be a little more tumultuous. So in our work with farm families, we do talk a lot about the culture of agriculture,
Mhm.
and we've called this podcast today "The Founder's Role to Foster a Healthy Farm Business Culture." So you've been working with some founders, Lyle, and have a lot of experience in your training with farm uh, family conflict, also in mediation. So what are your rules for getting into the canoe and not going over the falls in terms of the business culture?
Well, I want to start with a story here quick, and it's just of and this isn't a client in specifically. I know my colleagues here at Farm Family Coach have dealt with very similar things, and Elaine, you many times, but we occasionally get hired or often get hired. Um, and I think clients come with expectations that we're going to fix everything.
Mm.
Uh, and the same goes with mediation. Um, I have family members that are in conflict. We need your help. Yeah, okay, we'll help. Okay, fix that, and then we're gonna get back to normal. And it doesn't really work like that. Um, and it's just a I think it's just the nature of how complex family systems are.
Yes, and then add the complexity of agriculture alongside that.
Right, right. And you're running a business, and so then it so 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 I guess the story is these families are coming with us with expectations that we're going to do everything, and that's not realistic. And at the end of the day, like I said before, we'll jump into the canoe and assist you, but actually, like, assisting doesn't mean I'm paddling like mad. Assisting means that maybe I'll say, like, there's some rough waters up ahead. If we take this route, it might be a little bit easier, but you need to navigate us there. I can't get us there by myself, right? So it involves everybody doing a lot of the legwork, and that's where
And the heavy lifting.
and the heavy lifting. Yeah, the push-ups.
Portaging. No, we're going to stick with the canoe metaphor here, Lyle.
Yeah, right. Okay.
You know, now you got me back in the Canadian Shield with my boat.
Oh, and the bugs eating the
Yeah.
top of your head, and
Yeah, all that good adventure that we're having. So, um, what does it take then? What farmers have this thing about you need to fix my family because farmers are fixers. They're not toward people. They're what my friend Shelley Rose Charvet, who has wrote this amazing book called Words That Change Minds. They have away from behavior. So they want to work at avoiding problems and fixing
yeah,
problems. It's the way
yeah.
a lot of farmers are wired. So what part of your story do you want to share with you?
Well, what interests me about farm family, I was just thinking about this morning. Family businesses have it really difficult because you can behave however you want, and you're never going to get fired, right? That's often the case.
Well, not according to John Fast, Dr. Fast, who calls himself the farm family business doctor. He says if Chip is behaving badly, you might have to fire your son.
Well, and I agree with him, but but I don't think that happens that often, right?
I've seen it only once in my 30 some years of coaching. Yeah.
Right. And that's what makes it so tricky, is that, on both ends, you've got founders that are behaving poorly, and you've got employees or children that are behaving poorly, and they just continue to work despite that.
Nothing ever changes.
And nothing ever changes, and the culture is miserable, and there's like there's no I think people put up with that because they feel like, well, I'm never going to get kicked off of this, or I own it, I can behave however I want, or I'm going to inherit it whenever mom and dad pass away, so I can behave however I want.
That could
Any
take
any
years.
other
Wow.
What's that?
That could take years for mom and dad to die.
Right. Yeah. Well, and you and I have seen it. There's 50-year-old son or daughter still miserable on the farm waiting for their chance. And unfortunately, the sad thing is they're basically waiting for mom and dad to pass away so they can.
So let's define what we're talking about here. When we talk about making the farm business culture better and what the founder's role is in that,
Mhm.
we have used the language around it's what we believe to be true. So it's what people value. You're talking about bad behavior. So that's the second piece is behavior.
Mhm.
And the third piece is how people make decisions. So it's believe, behave, decide. But this behavior that keeps turning and turning around and around as bad behavior, why do you think that's happening?
I think there's a lot of work that people need to do on themselves that isn't
Internally?
happening
Mhm.
internally. Um, and that's my story that I share with clients, right? In my processing of not transitioning into leadership on the farm, um, kind of had to deal with some things that I didn't want to, and started going to therapy and started having those conversations with professionals, and having a good look at myself. And had you told me at the time that actually, Lyle, some of this is on your shoulders for some of this going the way it is, I wouldn't have believed you. I would have said, no, it's not my fault. I'm not doing anything wrong, right? But I couldn't take the perspective of owning it until I recognized my own bad behavior, right? And did some of that work. And I listened to.
I'm just gonna pause you for a second there,
Yeah.
just for the people who have this podcast in their ears and are running through the forest in Chilliwack, BC, or shoveling grain somewhere, or tending to the cattle. What you've just said is we have to take personal responsibility for how we're showing up in our
Yeah.
farm business.
Yeah.
And sometimes that requires looking in the mirror and looking at what you're doing that is working and is helpful and what is not helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, totally.
So
And I think
after you did that work, what happened next?
it yeah, I started to, well, first of all, it opened my eyes to other family members' perspective that I wouldn't have been able to relate to back then, right? So it made me more empathetic. Um, it has slowly helped me to become less reactive, right? So in the moment, I can hear something that would have normally set me off, and I can stand back and say, okay, I'm a little bit more in tune with my emotions right now. What that person just said really ticks me off, but I'm gonna, like we've talked about this many times, we're gonna believe that the intent of that loved one, my family member, was not to hurt me,
Yeah.
that perhaps I misunderstood, right? Um, and all of those, like those things take so much work as an individual, and a professional can't just do that for you, right? Because you and I aren't there every minute of the day, right? And also because families are complex, like I have no idea what's going to trigger or going to set somebody off, because there's all sorts of backstory that that we can never know. So it really is on the, like, everybody should be doing this work, but I think it's on the shoulders of the founders to to prioritize this stuff and say this is the culture that we are going to have, and these are the boundaries, that, like, creating those boundaries. And your podcast from the middle of April with his name is,
Andrew Leafo.
yes, right, the servant leadership.
Mhm.
And I really like those things, and having a purpose and vision for values for the organization is super important. But if you don't know who you are, right? And you're kind of not a great leader, but you're just the owner and you're plowing through it anyways. Um, I think some of that work on the organization is futile if you're not doing the work on yourself first.
So my curiosity then, and I've had to apologize as a speaker on many occasions, especially to the men founders, because women are also founders of farms. And they say, Elaine, I feel like I'm getting a little beat up here.
Hmm.
And I say, well, Charlie, that's because you hold all the power.
Hmm.
That's because you're 72 years old and you don't have a plan in place. And the canoe is kind of spinning in this little eddy of turmoil here because nobody knows what direction the canoe is supposed to be going, or the farm. And you're having a hard time letting go and stepping back without stepping away. And you're also highly avoidant to conflict. You're not willing to sit
Hmm.
tough conversations. And so how when you see this presenting, because we've called this, how to help, what is the founder's role in having a better family business, farm business culture? How do you coach that founder to be more internally aware and to sort of embrace positive conflict behavior? What can you do to help this man?
Yeah. One of the big personality, kind of, not a test, but one of the big personality orderings that I am a huge fan of is called the Enneagram, and it's
Mm.
quite an in-depth look at there are 9 personality types, and there are some tests that you can go through to figure out which number you are on there. But how I did it was I read a document that went through all of them and gave bullet points, and I really related to Enneagram number 1, for example,
Okay.
for me. And that told me highly sensitive to criticism. Oh, yeah.
Oh, that would be me. Okay.
Interesting. Okay,
Mm.
so every time my wife is bringing something up with me that she's upset about, it's not necessarily a criticism of me. It's
It's
just something that
something
she's
she
upset
needs.
about,
Yep.
right?
Hmm.
So the personality test, and it doesn't have to be the Enneagram, but if you don't know that you're highly sensitive to criticism, and you are, it's really hard to operate in a healthy way, right? Because everything that you see through your lens as criticism, which was never intended to be criticism, um, comes across that way, right? And so then you it immediately puts you into a stressed out position, and you respond in an unhealthy way. So
I'm
the personality tests are certainly the big one.
I'm just thinking of Beyond the Crops podcast with Jenna Oshner and Mary Pat Sass, because they mention the Enneagram lots, and somebody's diagnosed me as number 3. I have no idea. I've never done the work on that piece, but our coaching team does have the work of Dr. Ken Keyes called the Personal Style Indicator, which we have used on our farm, which is extremely helpful to see how my husband is so wired for task as the founder, and my successor son is really wired for people, and his spouse is really wired for cognitive detail. And I'm kind of a combination of 3, but I suck at cognitive detail. So there's no way you're going to get me doing the farm books. That is never going to happen.
Yeah.
So clarity, Lyle, through doing some kind of internal work through therapy and coaching, counseling, but also clarity around finding how your personality is wired and what your sensitive spots, so to speak, might be,
Yeah.
would be helpful.
Yeah. So number 3, just an aside, it's called the achiever.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And you certainly fit fit the mold for a lot of the number 3 characteristics.
All right, Lyle, I'll get you to send me the thing that you filled out and I'll do it and see what that is. So as an achiever, I also want to see success in farm
Yeah.
families, and we've been doing
Right.
work for a long time. Where is where is conflict avoidance mucking this up? People not willing to sit to get difficult feedback. Founders saying, "Oh, Elaine, I feel like you're beating up me as the dad a little bit." And I said, "Well, what are you doing to have a better culture on your farm?" So what are the other things that you've seen in your experience?
Yeah, the like, again, the Enneagram has really good, um, kinda discussions of where people go in stress and how they handle conflict, and, we also do some of these things too, the conflicts dynamics profile,
Right,
right,
or
which
CGP. Yeah.
right, which really helps. I part of my, um, processing was taking some courses at Mediation Services, right, just using the resources that were available for me to just learn about conflict. And and I don't know why I'm interested in this stuff. Like I didn't take that course reluctantly. It was just something that I saw that I thought, "Oh, that's interesting." Um so I also acknowledge that a lot of people don't want to do this work, right? It's hard. Um I feel fortunate that I enjoy it. Um but that course really opened my eyes to, okay, here is my role in conflict, right? Here's how I act. Um, so for example, when my wife and I are in conflict, my voice, my body language, my voice gets into a raised level very quickly. My eyes, my face communicates um harsher things than what I'm intending to say with my words. And my wife feels very, and I'm big. I'm 6'8", right? So
You're a presence, man.
right, and you can't ignore the fact also, like, I'm also a man, and men have power, right? And so when I'm exerting this, then my wife feels very pushed into a corner, and I've had to pay careful attention to, okay, when you're in conflict and you're acting that way, it it has an effect on people, right? And so the other side of it is understanding where my wife goes in conflict. She avoids it.
Mm.
Um and so she has work to do too, right? But part of my role is to, okay, she's nervous around conflict. I'm a little bit more hands-on. How do I approach it with her that makes her less nervous, right? How do you approach and beyond conflict, right? How do I approach you if you're not a details person, right? For example, on the family farm. So what tasks can we divvy up to the employees and the family members on the farm, that are suitable for everybody?
Mm.
Um,
And fits a job description where they'll shine and work from their strengths.
yeah, yeah. Now the other thing that I want to talk about, unless you have more questions about the conflict.
No, you just keep going. The
I
next thing I just
wanna-
I just want to pause for 1 second. I'm going to go into my cupboard here because
yeah,
based on what we're talking about, I have this fancy dancy handout that I want to use sometime in this podcast because it's called encouraging the heart of this farm. And I think that's what we're talking about, Lyle, is the things that don't cost a lot of money but cost a lot of intention because it's your behavior, right?
mhm,
It's not like going out and buying the next new piece of equipment or whatever to make your production skills better or increasing in quota or whatever. It's things that are really going to change the culture. So the conflict piece is important. So we've mentioned, just to repack here, the Enneagram is another place for people to get more self-awareness about their behavior and what style they are. We also have the personal style indicator, which we'll put in the show notes. We'll put a sample and a link to that. And you also mentioned the CDP, which is the conflict dynamic profile, which we've talked about on many podcasts because I'm always bringing it up because you also talked about emotion. And you talked also about criticism, being sensitive to criticism. And I have a farm family that I'm coaching right now where when the father went and left the meeting for a few minutes, the successors, mid-generation people said, we get a lot of criticism here. We don't really have a lot of affirmation.
Mm.
And so that's a negative downward spiral culture that's not helping that particular family. And then you also mentioned mediation skills, which is also where I trained back in the day, 22 days of training back in 2003, which is 22 years ago now. But I still send people there because there's also online training. So for anybody listening to this all across North America or even in Australia or Ireland or South Africa, we have listeners all over the world. They can access these really good resources for their own development and also to get better awareness with the people that they're in business with or the people they're helping.
Yeah, it's really neat at mediation services in Winnipeg. They often the courses that you're taking when they're in person, you're doing role plays, and so they're
Mhm.
putting you in rooms where you're pretending to be the mediator, and you've got two participants with you, and you're right in there. It's such good
You're
practice.
practicing. Yes.
Yeah, and it's amazing how into it you can get,
Yes.
but how much you learn from those, even though they're not real.
Well, and also interesting that you can do the role playing without having a script because you just kind of dive into that. So
Yeah.
what other insights do you have for founders to
So
foster?
something else that I often reflect on from growing up. So when I was like me and all my siblings, we did lots of tasks on the farm. We were hoeing weeds and we were planting trees. That was in the years of planting shelter belts and sweeping out bins. And I think by the time I was 14, I was starting to earn an income on the farm. So at that point, um, I didn't realize it, but I've got we're and we lived physically on the farm, right? So I've got my dad here who is also my boss, right? Who's paying me. And it's a really that's that's really difficult to navigate as a 14-year-old boy when you're who is also prone to being highly sensitive to criticism, right? So you've got boss over here saying, I don't really like the way that you did that job, can you go and do it again? And I'm hearing it as a 14-year-old boy from dad saying, son, you performed poorly, I'm disappointed, right? And that was just crushing for me. And that's been a lot of the work that I'd had to do is saying, actually, my dad's intentions as boss were to just correct the he wanted a better job done. He wasn't criticizing me. Um, and that's just to illustrate how complex family businesses are, because it's not, again, it's not as simple as an employee performing poorly and the boss saying, okay, this is the third time you've performed poorly. We're gonna have to let you go. Um, right? I think you're muted, Elaine. Sorry.
Sorry. Um,
Yep.
let so let's just bring this back a little bit to you know, I have actually physically suggested, how many ball caps farmers have, right?
Mm.
And I've almost said, take the dad hat off and say, I'm talking to you as your manager and as the owner of this business. These are the things that I'm seeing having problems with. And we do have tools, folks. So if you're listening to this, reach out to us and ask for the performance worksheet. It's one page. What are the strengths you're bringing to this farm? What are the weaknesses? How would you like more support from management? And number 4, what is your learning plan for the next year? All this is courtesy of Dick Whitman, who you've heard me mention many times because he has fabulous tools and we're licensed to use them. He's also to be found at whitmanconsulting.com with an amazing farm management binder. But I think I've had this situation with my own son where Ian will say, Mom, why are you so mad at me? I said, Ian, my tone of voice is changing because I need you to listen really carefully to what I'm saying. I'm not angry with you, but what I'm about to say is really important and I need to make sure you got the message.
Right.
Well, now, of course, many years have gone by and he's in his late 30s and I'm in my late 60s. And our roles are totally different now because I'm stepping back and have stepped back quite significantly. I'm the partner to Wes, who's still, working with his son. And he will always be the founder until he dies. But Ian is in a position now of management. So do you also not think, Lyle, that part of the cultural tension in a founder's relationship on the farm is the not knowing of where to start the conversation about how to make the transfer of labor management and ownership? And also he didn't get a great roadmap from his parents.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious about what you suggest founders do to say, I'm talking to you, and this is what I would coach. I'm talking to you as the owner of this business, not as your dad. I will always be your dad, but I'm really not happy with what we're not accomplishing because A, B, and C have not happened. And so I think it's really clear in your language.
Yeah.
Are you talking to that person as their mother, or are you talking to that person as the manager of that business?
Right.
And that's just one practical tip that I would offer to our listeners today is also sharing intent, because it's not like you said, it was not your father's intent to cause harm to your spirit by criticizing the job you did, but that's how you received the message. And so another helpful language, I think, in this culture piece, it's not my intent to be nasty or to be firm with you. What's my intent is to focus on the problem we have here, and we have to create solutions around it. You're not the problem, but you're the one I've tasked to fix this problem, and it doesn't seem to be going very well.
Yeah.
So what do we both need to do here?
Yeah.
And take joint responsibility.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. It as one and as one of your previous podcast guests has said too, like it's not quite as simple as it was 50 years ago when land was cheap and you kind of it wasn't thought of as a business, right? And now you really need to be cut and dry between, okay, this is manager and owner talking now, and just as important as important is going back at supper or on Sunday at lunch when you're all together and saying, now it's dad talking because we're together as a family.
And now we're going to concentrate on the family circle.
Right. And I'm gonna give you affirmation as a son or daughter, right? Or it's mom talking, right? We're not talking business. Or maybe if we want to talk business, we can, but just be really clear about how those things work, right? And I think that's what really boils down to it boils it down is that the founders need to be doing that work. If if I think if Ian was constantly pressuring you guys to do that and you were always resistant to it, it would never happen, right? And that's where the onus is on the founders to create that culture um that for the organization, right? I think it doesn't surprise me that so many family businesses fail after 3 generations, right? Because a lot of
Less than 15% go to beyond the third generation.
right, because you've got second generation that puts up with it, and then finally they get their day, and then the third generation says, screw this is the most toxic, miserable work environment I've never seen. I could go elsewhere and find an amazing boss and work in a successful industry and not put up with this crap that I have to put up with at home, right? And the family business is over, right?
Well, and that's why I also want to encourage listeners. I know it's really hard to know that your son or daughter is graduating from high school and wants to come straight back to the farm, or graduates college and wants to come straight back to the farm, and had this conversation again this week out of curiosity. Why is your son not going to ag school? Why is your son not working for someone else to see a different style of being, relating, and management? And, in our case, Ian only made that happen for about 6 months, and he did go to ag school, so that was great. But ag school for him was life-changing in terms of the peer networks that he created and also the relationships to his professors that really gave him new insights and new confidence to try different kinds of business and ways of being.
Yeah. A good friend of mine farms north of Brandon. His son recently graduated diploma, and then in the midst of a labor shortage, they said to him, "You cannot work here for 2
Wow.
years."
That was strong.
Right? You cannot work here, and that's great, but what I also wanna see is my friend, the owner and boss, also spending work on his management or spending time on his management skills, not just while
Yes.
his son is away learning
Right.
something,
Not
right?
not putting all the onus on the son.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So it really bothers me, Lyle, that I read this book lately called The Let Them Theory by Mel Robbins. Because one of the chapters, I think it's chapter 8, says, people will only change when they want to. And I just
Mhm.
go, ugh, right? You can be in that canoe teaching them the J stroke and teaching them, how to balance their weight and how to do portage as well. But people are only going to change their behavior when they want to. So when you have been in the coaching, the sacred space of sitting in a family circle, coaching a founder, where have you seen the shifts start to happen?
Um, that's a good question. I think, I haven't been doing this that long, um, but there there are stories of families that are slowly making progress, right? Which is something to be celebrated, right? Um, especially for, for people that grew up in an environment where they didn't have that language, right? And they're putting in the work to try and do this, um, to learn these skills. Um, I honestly, there aren't as many happy stories as I would like to see, right? And that's the sad part about this work is that kind of that bad behavior just continues. Or this idea that, well, I'm the owner, I can do as I please, and they'll deal with it when I'm gone. Um, which I think it another thing that one of the most profound things a therapist asked me once is, "What do you want your tombstone to say?" Right? As I was
Interesting question.
right, and it's sobering for sure. But I knew as soon as she asked that, I knew, oh, well, I don't really want it to say Lyle was a successful business person, even though that's what I'm spending all this time kind of stressing about. And yes, I'm obligated to earn an income for my family and support them, but that's not what I want to be remembered for. Um, and again, what Andrew was talking about was kind of defining who you are as an individual first and separating
Your
you from the
identity.
organization, your
Right.
identity, right?
And I think that's another thing that trips up founders is their identity is very much, I am a farmer. I put purple gas in my diesel. I get to make a lot of decisions. I can put all my expenses through the farm account. I am in control
Mhm.
and I will work really hard. And so there's all kinds of stories that may or may not be serving those farmers and founders as they age in place on their farm. Um, I just want you to know my tombstone will say, meet me in heaven,
Mhm.
because I saw that on a tombstone in Ireland and it really grabbed.
Mhm.
I thought that is a great Irish tombstone, and I have Irish DNA, and that's what I hope my tombstone gets put on. And actually in that process right now too of buying burial plots. Wow, which is an interesting exercise as well because it's another podcast that we've recorded with Graham Bardsdale says, do not ignore your mortality.
Mhm.
So we don't talk about what we want that legacy to look like. And
Mhm.
at the end of the day, do you want to be rich towards God and rich in relationship? Because you're not taking your combine with you to heaven.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. The drivenness, though, that's also part of my achiever personality type is another book I read this winter by Gina Wickman called Shine, about entrepreneurs actually are wired in their DNA to be driven. So we have all these farmers who are driven, who want to be successful, who basically what they're really happy doing is actually doing the farming. But again, the culture of how the behavior doesn't put maybe enough time into the family circle. I'm also curious what you understand from founders, because I was also speaking with Cheryl Mitchell on another podcast, and she's very astute around the different generations. Your father, at the age he is, and Wes's father at the age he was, were not open to sharing their emotions or talking about their feelings. That
Yeah.
was part of their training, so to speak. Is the clash of the generational differences of how they see the world, I think, is another thing that we need to put in place. So I just want to show you, this is this is fancy dancy sheet here that I have.
Oh yeah.
I had it printed and then I never got to use it. So I want to use it today. So you've talked about, you know, roles and responsibilities. The role of the founder is to be a leader in how he or she sets the culture. And also this navigation between what you spend as family time and what you spend as business time. And the other thing you said in a different way was doing internal work.
Mm-hmm.
On my sheet, it says personal growth is encouraged, right? That we're all lifelong learners. We're all willing to improve and be better humans on this world, so that we can have kindness and have a culture that helps. What are some of the what's some of the helpful language? You alluded to a bit of that when you talk about conflict that you have with Ashley sometimes. Like what's helpful language for a founder to say? Is it forgiveness, Lyle? Like I'm thinking forgiveness has to play a role here too, in terms of fathers who are highly critical, or it's always got to be their way or the highway. How does the next gen stand against that, or say, hey, I have a different way of looking at this?
Yeah. Yeah, I think forgiveness is a big part of it. And that's not a snap moment, right? That takes years of working through, right? And kind of wrestling with, I want to forgive, but you just said something really dumb that really ticks me off, and now I'm back to not forgiving, right? And you kind of wrestle with that and you go back and forth. Um the and something you said before about, you know, my father's generation and the one before him, they didn't have language for this stuff, and I don't think that's a reason to not do it, to not tackle this stuff, because
It'd be
I
just
may feel comfortable talking about it, but there are a lot of things that I am uncomfortable with dealing with, and part of my personal growth is acknowledging that, hey, I'm really uncomfortable when I'm speaking to my accountant, because I immediately feel dumb.
okay.
Like I start to sweat, and part of my mindfulness or my objective state in that moment is to say, this is really uncomfortable. It's okay to be uncomfortable. Let's sit through it, and 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 there is no right way to do it, right? I have a client who avoids conflict, right? I can give you some tools to try and walk through it a little bit, but also there's no exact right way to do it. What the right way is for you to try, right? And ask someone you're in conflict with, what's going on for you, right? And that's what every generation can do. They can try, right?
And they can ask, what's going on for you?
Yeah.
Not how are you?
Hmm.
How are you doing?
Yeah.
How are you doing opens up a much different conversation.
Right, because we're all pretty good at reading people, right? Hey, I noticed I couldn't help but notice your body language a little bit this morning. You seem upset about something. Can we talk about it? Was it something? I'm worried that body language kind of started after I had said something. I'm worried that maybe I communicated something and you took it, or, well, yeah, I communicated something that didn't really land with you properly, right? So let's talk about it. Um,
Well, and the other forgiveness statement that comes from the book with Dr. Gary Chapman, When Sorry is Not Enough, he says, uh, I sense that things are not right between us.
mhm.
Um, what do I have to do to make it right? So you're
Yeah,
taking ownership
yeah,
of the relationship, and um, there's a lot of other ways that we could go with this conversation, Lyle, too, on the strain of not having a healthy culture and what that does to the mental wellness or not wellness, illness of
yeah.
the Khan family. Um, have you read any books lately that have been helpful to you? What the one that came to mind for me was that we refer quite often as Necessary Endings
Mhm.
by Dr. Henry Cloud, What to Do When Things Don't Work Out, because I have witnessed brothers who just could not get along in the same culture on the same farm business. And the founder in this case, it's a beautiful story. It's a happy story, which I would like to share and have permission from the family to share. It happened a long time ago in my practice, but it became very clear that these two brothers could not work together. And the father did the assessments, did the conflict dynamic profile, had coaching, and the son read the book with his wife. Every night they read a chapter. And he said, Elaine, we have decided that we are going to leave. We want to be part of this family. We do not want to struggle and struggle and struggle and be part of this business. And the father, bless him, was financially capable to give the son who left a very large 7-figure gift to help him get started in a new way.
Mm. Yeah,
People say, oh, why dock me into that family? And not every family will have the financial capacity to do it, but it was also the intention, Lyle. It was like the antithesis of the prodigal son. He wasn't the prodigal, but he was being blessed by his father and mother to have some cash flow to get a leg up to get him to start another entity or another
yeah,
business.
yeah,
And so I just want people to listen to this, that if you're feeling right now that the culture in your family is not good in terms of how you are aligning or not aligning what your cherished beliefs are, the behavior's not great. I always say you get the behavior you accept. And thirdly, how decisions are being made. Maybe you do need to hire a facilitator to help bring you together to start sorting what needs to shift and how that could be done in a way
yeah,
that works for each generation.
yeah, yeah. And that's a beautiful story of of a dad, really being a dad in that moment,
Yes.
and acknowledging what was going on with his sons, right? And but also being realistic about a business, right? And that's where this comes back to businesses that aren't families. People come and go all the time because of conflict. They don't stay there with a terrible manager for 25 years putting up with it. They move
No.
on, and that's okay to move on. Um,
I'd get rid of the terrible manager. That'd be my solution. Where's all this conflict coming from? Why is this not
yeah.
been resolved?
I
That's
have
also
I have a family member who's a CEO of a small manufacturing business, and he told me when got the job, you know, if I don't perform, I'm the first person who's fired.
mm,
He's the CEO of a manufacturing business, and the board will say, "Sorry,
bye. Mhm.
bye." And it was just like, wow, uh,
That's a lot of pressure.
that's a lot of pressure that farm founders don't have because no one can fire them, right? And so they get away with crap.
Well, I always say you might not want to fire people in your business, but you might want to say, just like Dr. Henry Cloud says, this is a necessary ending, and I have chosen to go to a different place that feeds what I need because what I need is not being met here after many different times of trying to get what I need. And
Yeah.
as you were speaking, I also was thinking of a family I worked with in Manitoba, and they made me laugh. And I said, how are you doing? And they said, I don't know, Elaine, but we think you should get a t-shirt. And I said, oh, what's the t-shirt going to say? And they said, well, the t-shirt should say, what would Elaine say? And so sometimes they use my one-liners or they say, I'm going to call Elaine, which is the accountability partner, right? That if a family can't sort things out themselves with the skills that they've learned or tried to put into place, it's okay, and they have permission to ask for help. So, as we close this off today, what's the one main thing that if you could really shift the mindset of founders in agriculture? You work with founders all the day with your marketing business. And I don't know what the price of canola has done since we've been talking, but that's, your sweet spot is being a marketing advisor. And again, not all farmers use marketing advisors because not all farmers think they need one. And
Right.
some farmers are very proud. I did it myself, Elaine.
Yeah.
I go, good for you, Charlie, but you've been selling at the bottom third of the market all your life, and I'm just not even going to go down that path. So, what's the one thing you think has the most importance?
I really think the big thing is figuring out who you are,
Mm,
um,
being self-aware.
being self-aware, and a friend of mine that I met lately, who Abe Taves from
Oh,
Regina.
yes.
Uh,
Financial planner, wonderful man.
yeah, he loves to engage people when they're with their stories, and I think the
Mm.
story is really important too. Like, tell me about your farm. Um, why are you farming, right? And so all those questions kind of get at some of the business identity, but then also what makes that person tick, right? Before we dive into organizational leadership, what is it
Mm.
about you as a person that drives you, and how you operate, right?
And to build on that question, the one I like to ask to aging farmers is, as you age in place on this farm, because you're not leaving, what does a good day look like to you, Dad? What does a good day look like to you, Mom, as you continue to age in place on this farm? And I had a really lovely day yesterday with my grandchildren. They were drawing chalk on the drive on the cement driveway. They were helping me cook hamburgers. They were using bungee cords and a tarp to make a parachute. It was one of those delightful moments that this is where I want to be, and
Yeah.
when I want the joy I want to experience as everybody gets older and keeps growing on this farm. So thanks, Lyle, for your input. How do people find you the easiest way?
Oh, probably on your website. I think there's a direct link on there,
Right.
and yep,
Farmfamilycoach.com,
yep.
right? And also to go back and listen to other podcasts that you've been on. And thank you, folks, for joining us, spending time with us today. We have no idea what you're doing right now. We hope you're doing it safely. And this will air on June 24th. So we will shout out to our Quebecois friends who are celebrating Saint Jean Baptiste Day today. And when I was a young teenager, I spent a lot of weeks in Quebec learning French. So all the best to wherever you are in your culture, on your business, and let us know how we can help support your journey. And we'll see you next time. Bye for now. Are you tired of walking on eggshells with your family about the future of the farm? I'm Elaine Froese, and I've created the Farm Family Transition Membership to help farm families like you talk it out, plan it right, and protect your relationships in the process. With monthly coaching tools and a like minded community, your next step just got a whole lot easier. Visit elainefraise.com/membership today because your farm transition doesn't have to be a fight.